Anyway, moving on. Just Stop Oil. 5 people have been sent down after a trial. 4 of them for 4 years, one of them, Roger Hallam, for 5 years. I think it's an outrageous amount of time. Also, and I think perhaps more concerning to me is actually how the trial was conducted. And what we had is Judge Christopher Heller, or Heeler, H-E-H-I-R, denying the right of the defense to put forward the political reasons why these 5, clambered above the M25, the motorway around London, and why they disrupted traffic, wasn't it, for something like 3 days, caused an almighty traffic jam, and no doubt disrupted the wider London economy. They didn't have the right to put forward, well, it's global warming. It's us that are doing it. It's the motor car economy. It's the capitalist economy. It's production for the sake of, production. It's production for the sake of profit. Whatever their reasons were, the judge prevented them from doing a political defense. This is an increasing pattern with the judiciary. Now, there are people on this call that know much more about the law than I do, but this sort of right of juries to hear the politics, the right of the defense to make a political defense, goes right back in terms of English history. And judges have actually, or at least one judge, for example, I've been told about, and I say on this webinar, know more about it than I do. There's been cases where a judge who stopped juries listening to the political reasons of why I did it have actually been hauled in front of the House of Commons and locked up in the jails of Parliament, for doing that. And I know from my experience with the CPGB, and I'm talking about this CPGB, with colleagues of ours who were involved in the solidarity movement with the Timex strikers. We had a whole factory that was closed down by this transnational up in Dundee in Scotland. They sacked the entire workforce. The majority of the workforce were women. Our comrades were going to go out and do slogans on Timex offices or whatever it happened to be near London. The police intercepted them and charged conspiracy. You can get 8 years for conspiracy. And the comrades put forward a political defense. There were 4 of them, and they explained to the jury why they're doing it. They weren't hooligans. They weren't, as the police charged them with, conspiring to burn down the offices of Timex. Apparently, the police came in with what they called a petrol can, was actually not petrol, but diesel. Either way, no, they weren't conspiring to burn down anything. They were intent on doing slogans in solidarity with the Timex strikers. We got down Timex strikers. We got down the convener. We had a very good barrister for us who put forward the politics of it. And I can remember being in the court, and much to our delight, the jury, not by majority verdict, but by 12 of them, said, well, of course they're guilty. That's subtext. We know they've not denied what they were doing, but they pleaded innocent, and we're finding them innocent. Now that should have happened with these Just Say No to Just Stop Oil 5. They should have been allowed to put forward the politics. They should have been allowed to persuade this jury of 12 people that they were politically right to do what they were doing. Now, I can disagree with the tactics, but if I was on a jury, I would certainly find them innocent, because I would go, okay, I don't think that stopping the London traffic for 3 days is going to stop the system. And that's what they think they can do. And precisely my warning to the comrades, the 5 of them, and others in Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion and other such, I would call it elitist operations, is that there's a tendency to either be persuaded or persuade yourself to go for more and more extreme elitist actions. So, for example, I had to have a sort of small titter. I certainly got great sympathy for those activists that went to Madame Tussauds, and didn't they custard pie our future monarch and his queen, with I don't know what they made it with, but anyway, they custard pied their waxwork models. Look jolly good. But isn't there a tendency, with such actions, ultimately you end up with not symbolic actions, but why not do what the shooter attempted to do to Trump? Why not go in for individual assassination? Why not go in for a terrorist campaign? Well, I can tell you why you shouldn't do that, but I can also tell you why I think such elitist actions are also misguided, because what we need is to win majority opinion over to a program that basically can deliver you a system change. You're not going to get system change from protest politics. You can only get system change from revolutionary politics. And I think the only practical program to achieve that is organizing the working class into a mass communist party, not just in Britain, but in the United States, in China, in India, across Europe, and the working class coming to power on a global scale. Not necessarily all at once, but to me, that's the most practical, realistic, and humane strategy. It's more difficult. I mean, I admire, the heroism, the willingness to sacrifice themselves of these 5. 5 years in prison, 4 years in prison. You have to admire these people. But is it going to achieve what they want it to achieve? And I don't think it will. It's not going to persuade the Prime Minister. It's not going to persuade the City of London to stop investing money in order to make more money. Capitalism relies on continuous expansion. And until we control capital and turn capital into our, back from alienated labor into labor that is under the control of the producers, the system of self-expansion, endless self-expansion, will continue. And therefore, human civilization, nature as it is at the present, will be in danger. So we could have a civilization collapse, mass extinction. Maybe it's already, maybe we're already in the midst of it. But that's what I would urge comrades in XR and in Just Stop Oil and other such campaigns to consider. Much more difficult, have to be much more patient, but nonetheless, we need a realistic strategy that goes beyond, as I said, protest politics. And of course, what's happening now on this particular front is that the authorities are imposing more and more restrictions on protests. This isn't going to be just confined to the Tories. This will be something that also our glorious new Home Secretary would also be minded to do. And no protest about this, these sentences from the former Director of Private Prosecutions, Sir Keir Starmer. Just to come back on a number of points. I mean, the left, it sort of doesn't surprise me, but it continues to disappoint me. And the danger is that when it goes for a party, it will either be a sect or it will be something like momentum controlled, top down, with so-called democracy, usually of a clique sort of type stuff. Anyway, I haven't really followed Roger Hallam, but I would suggest that we send the weekly worker to the Five. They'll have plenty of time on their hands, and clearly he's someone who thinks, and they're pretty rare. So he's definitely someone that we would do well to engage with and to learn from. It's not just us who are handing out, the pearls of wisdom. I'm sure he'll have plenty to teach us too. Nonetheless, I'm glad that he's moving. That's very encouraging. And all I can say is that, for these people, if I was on the jury, I know I've said it before, I would certainly find them innocent. I've got absolutely no hesitation, even though loads of people are inconvenienced. It's why they're doing it that's the important thing. They're not doing it out of bloody mindedness. They're precisely doing it because they think it's in our interests. And it is in our interests to actually stop global warming. Just in terms of what Minnie was saying, I mean, I don't think we should dismiss local assemblies. After all, if we think about local assemblies, they did come into existence, as far as I understand it, in 1917. Things called Soviets. There was one in St. Petersburg. Many of them cropped up, in barracks, in factories, in different towns. The question is that in and of themselves, are they the answer? And if you come out and say, yes, they're the answer, then I think you're mistaken. Because what you would have had in 1917, I think with no exceptions, is that these Soviets would have been led by pro-war socialists. So that would have been the right wing of the Mensheviks, the right wing of the Socialist Revolutionary Party, parties that wanted to support the a provisional government that emerges out of what was left of the Tsar's Duma, that wanted to carry on the alliance with Anglo-French imperialism, and that included Russia winning, I think it was still called Constantinople, but you know what I mean, Istanbul, the Straits, the Dardanelles and all the rest of it. So yeah, local assemblies, fine, I've got no problem, but it's not the answer. That's what I would argue. In the same way, I would argue trade unions. Of course, you're going to get bureaucracy. Of course, you're going to get nepotism. And I think you described it well. And it doesn't mean that with a Communist Party, there are no problems. That would be foolish in the extreme. All you need to do is think about the history of Communist parties in the 20th century and to see how ridiculous such a statement would be. What we need to do, though, is look at what sort of party, what sort of culture is most likely to win us liberation. And in my view, a party that's mass, a party that's democratic, a party that views open debate as the norm, that's your best bet. That's all I would say. It's not guaranteed. It doesn't mean you just sit there and let other people do it for you. It's a struggle. It's a constant fight. Yeah, but this is the best vehicle that exists. And we're not talking about the CPGB that's hosting this. We're talking about a genuine party with deep roots in the working class, with deep ties to other parties of a similar sort internationally, indeed organized on an international scale. then we can look to the future with confidence in a way I think that we can't, unfortunately, at the present time. And it's a cliche, I know, but people are right when they say it's easier for us to imagine the end of human civilization, indeed the end of human species, than it is to us imagine as a serious project socialism and communism. I mean, at the moment, that's viewed as crazy. But the end of the world, in terms of our human world, that's perfectly commonsensical. It's something we all recognize as a distinct danger. And I'll simply end with this sort of observation. I don't think hierarchy is inevitable, i.e., that what you have is some bod in charge that is in charge of everything. But I do think myself, my own experience is that certain people know more than I do when it comes to certain subjects, and I'm more than willing for them to take charge. But it's precisely take charge on the basis that we can pull you back down, we can take the piss out of you, we can relieve you of that role. In other words, what we want is the democratization of authority. And what we want is authority to be asserted in the right conditions. So, for example, just on this call, there are people running this call who are going to stay in charge. Who speaks when, i.e. Bob, but also how this damn thing works. I'm not going to argue with them on that. So there are plenty of things, like, for example, I already quoted Microsoft, that we're going to have an article this week. We'll have a follow-up article next week by people who really know what they're talking about. I'm just coming to this particular question, trying to bring some other angles onto it. But I'm no expert on Microsoft. I'm no expert on Linux. I'm in the hands of others on this question. So, for example, if you take an orchestra, if, for example, I was a musician, you still need at least in terms of an orchestra, you need a conductor. What we want is a conductor that's recallable, as opposed to the traditional, conductor that's an autocrat. Anyway.